Hi class, and welcome to this video on VCE Year 12 Economics, which is going to cover key knowledge points 9 and 10 from Unit 3 Outcome 1, which is all about this concept of the price elasticity of demand. What do I hope that you get out of this video? An understanding of these key knowledge points, so you'll understand what I mean by price elasticity of demand, and the significance of it, so what it actually means and why it's important. We will then delve into the factors that affect the price elasticity of demand, in particular the ones from the study design: degree of necessity, availability of substitutes, proportion of income, and time. These are, as we mentioned in Unit 3 Outcome 1, and these are the key knowledge points 9 and 10. So we'll make the assumption that you have understood the previous 8, which all have videos on those. So this is all about demand. So the video focuses on the price elasticity of demand, but let's do a quick recap of the law of demand and a demand curve. We understand that demand is a representation of how much a consumer is willing and able to buy at different prices. And there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Put simply, as price decreases, the quantity demanded will go up. So as price goes down, demand goes up. And as price increases, quantity demanded goes down. And we understand if this is a movement along, we are going to have contraction of demands if price increases, and we're going to have an expansion of demand if price decreases. Now, the price elasticity of demand includes that understanding of demand, but we are also interested in how much demand changes following a change in price. Because different products will change, how much their demand changes is different according to how much their change in price occurs. There is differences. The price elasticity of demand is a concept where we think about how responsive quantity demanded of a good or service is to a change in price. Now, I have underlined responsiveness, and it is really important when you're talking about anything to do with elasticity, you use the word responsiveness or responsive, and I'll use that as much as possible. How do we calculate this? Price elasticity of demand is using a calculation. We are going to calculate the percentage change in quantity demanded and divide it by percentage change in price. And as I mentioned, it's important in an exam or a SAC or just in everything you're doing, when asked about the elasticity of demand, you must use the word responsive or responsiveness. Your answer will be incomplete and will often lose a mark if it's not included. So to summarize before we look at an example and different categories of elasticity of demand, we are thinking about how much demand is changing as a result of a change in price, and how responsive or how big that change is in quantity demanded as a result of the price. Is it a big change or a small change? This is what we are measuring in price elasticity of demand. So let's look at an example about cherry tomatoes. So the fruit and vegetable sellers have observed that they have increased their price from $2.50 to $3. So we've gone from $2.50 to $3. There has been a price increase of 50 cents. But they've observed that their sales have dropped from 1,000 to 500 kilograms. So we've gone from 1,000 to 500 kilograms. So you might intuitively go, well, that is quite a big change in their sales. The price has only gone up by 50 cents, but their sales have dropped by half. So there's been quite a big change, cherry tomatoes have been quite responsive to the increase in price. But let's calculate the price elasticity of demand. Understanding its percentage change in quantity demanded and percentage change in price. So our percentage change in quantity demanded is that it has gone to 500 from 1,000 divided by 500. And we've gone from $3 to $2.50 to $3 from $2.50 in our price. So to work out the percentage change, we are going to write the new minus the old divided by the new outcome. Now this results in if we think about it, our quantity demanded has gone down by 100% because it has halved, and the price increase has gone up by 20%. This results in a price elasticity of demand of -5. So if we think about this in putting in words, because you're not going to have to do too much calculations of this, when the price of cherry tomatoes increased by 20%, going to $3 from $2.50, this reduced in the quantity demanded reduced by 100% because it went from to 500 kilograms, and it previously was 1,000. This has led to a high level of responsiveness of quantity demanded to price change, as evidenced by a price elasticity of demand greater than 1, and I'll explain why that's important. Now you might note that I have ignored the negative sign, and we always ignore the negative sign I'm talking about it, so I can say this price elasticity of demand is 5. Now that's quite complicated, but essentially what we have recognized is that the quantity demanded has halved when our price has only increased by 20%. There has been a big change, a high level of responsiveness when we have changed the price of our cherry tomatoes. So how do we start to categorize this calculation? We are going to talk about a number of them. We are going to talk about high price elasticity, where price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, and low price elasticity of demand when it is less than 1. And then we'll look at a few others quite quickly. So if we have a high price elasticity of demand, I'm going to say that we have an elastic product. This occurs when the price elasticity of demand is greater than 1. In this case, the product is very responsive to changes in price. Changes in price greatly impact the quantity demanded. So if price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, we say demand is elastic. This means that a change in price will lead to a relatively large change in quantity demanded. The larger the value of price elasticity of demand, we will say the more elastic, or remember the keyword, responsive demand is to changes in price. Cherry tomatoes price elasticity of demand was 5, so much more than 1, and that's why there was such a big change in the quantity demanded due to a relatively small change in price. So in this case, if suppliers lower their price, they will attract a bigger percentage increase in demand, and potentially that is a good thing. If suppliers increase their price, they will attract a bigger percentage decrease in demand. So you might almost intuitively start to go, price elasticity of demand greater than 1 might have potential benefits of suppliers lowering their price to maximize profit. This is represented by a relatively flat demand curve. Why? Because relatively small changes in price, so for example, a relatively small increase in price here leads to a bigger change in quantity. And that's why it is a relatively flat demand curve. And for example, if the price of a chocolate bar increased by 20% and demand decreased by 80%, we would calculate that our price elasticity of demand was -4 or 4, greater than 1, making it very elastic. Small changes in price have led to a large effect on demand. And that is a way that we can start to explain products in written responses. Conversely, low price elasticity of demand is going to be called inelastic. This is when our price elasticity of demand is less than 1. If price elasticity of demand is less than 1, we will say it is inelastic. And this means that a change in price will lead to a relatively smaller change in quantity demanded. The lower the value, the less elastic or responsive demand is to changes in price. So if suppliers lower their price, this will attract a smaller percentage increase in demand. And if suppliers increase their price, they will attract a smaller percentage decrease in demand. So this might give a supplier a hint that increasing their price is the better way to maximize their profit, because if they increase their price, the demand will go down, but to a lesser extent. This is represented by a steep demand curve. This is because, for example, a big change in price, in this case, price going up, will lead to a much smaller change in quantity demanded. So, for example, if the price of cigarettes increased by 30% and decrease in demand was only 5%, this is a small price elasticity of demand, making it very inelastic. Large change in prices lead to small effect on demand. Now we can have lots of different other types of elasticity. Medium or unit elastic is when price elasticity of demand equals 1. This is where the quantity demanded and price changes are equal. And the supply and demand curve will look something like this. We don't need to really focus too much on that, but understanding that it exists is important. There will be the exact same amount change of percentage of price in quantity demanded. So if price halves, quantity demanded will double. Perfectly elastic and inelastic price elasticity of demand do occur, but are often not that common. A perfectly inelastic demand curve would be vertical, like so, as demand would be completely unresponsive to changes in price. So whatever price you do, the demand will be the same. For example, a life-saving drug that people will pay any price to obtain, whatever price you give, everyone will demand it. It's quite uncommon. A perfectly elastic demand curve would be horizontal, as the smallest change in price would result in a completely loss of sales. So a small percentage increase in price would result in a complete loss of sales. For example, a highly competitive market. These are very uncommon to occur in the real world. What we are really interested in is what are the factors that influence price elasticity of demand? What are the factors that determine the responsiveness of changes of price to what is demanded? And there are 4 that we're going to focus on. Degree of necessity, availability of substitutes, proportion of income, and time. Degree of necessity is how necessary or essential is the product. If the product is deemed to be essential, it will usually have a low price elasticity of demand. What does that mean? Increases in price will have less changes in quantity demanded because you must have it. Whereas luxury products will have higher price elasticity of demand because you don't need it, it's not essential, so if the price goes up, you'll find something else. So if a product is essential, as I talked about, really what I mean by that, it is a need rather than a want, people will maintain their consumption as much as they can, even if price rises. So it's going to be low. Even if price increases, the price increase is large, the quantity demanded going down will be quite small because people must have it. For example, even if petrol prices rise, those who have a car and need to drive to get to work will still buy petrol. The demand for petrol is inelastic, it is essential. Demand for ice cream, though, is highly elastic. And if ice cream prices rise, people are okay to go without it. So price increases that are large, or price increases that are small, will result in a quantity demanded going down that is quite large, because they can find other things to do. Now, sometimes things that aren't necessary for some people will still have low price elasticity of demand because of addiction. So for example, cigarettes and alcohol, even as the prices have been going up, particularly cigarettes with taxes, people still buy it because even though it isn't essential for everyone, for those people it is, so they must buy it. The next factor is the availability of substitutes. The greater the number of substitutes available for a product, the more elastic the product. And substitutes are a product that you can purchase that will meet the same need or want as the product that we're thinking about. This is because an increase in price would encourage buyers to purchase a substitute instead. So for example, at a market, if the price of apples increase due to being out of season, consumers will find alternative fruits to purchase. So in this case, we will say it is more elastic. So if the price increasing, even if it's a small increase, likely the quantity demanded going down will be quite large because they'll just find another substitute that meets their needs or wants. However, a unique product that can't be easily substituted would be more inelastic, and they will be forced, even with large price changes, the quantity demanded will be less because you can't find the value, you can't meet that need or want anywhere else. And effective advertising and strong brands are tactics that businesses use to limit the perception to consumers that there are substitutes available. The proportion of income is important. The higher the percentage of income needed to purchase a good or service, the higher the price elasticity of demand. Products with high prices make up a larger proportion of income, and hence consumers will see the changes in these prices as more important, and the demand will be more elastic. It's taking up more of your income, so you will do without it if you can. And hence, what we mean by this is, if the price goes up, even in a small way, this will likely result in the quantity demanded going down in quite a large way, because even the small increase is taking up a larger amount of their income. For example, a 50% increase in a box of matches would not likely be matched with a 50% decrease in the demanded because they're really cheap. But a 10% increase in the price of a house would cost thousands more and leads to a larger decrease in demand. And the final one to think about is, and it shouldn't say proportion of income, it should say time. It's important to understand in the short term, demand is less elastic, as business buyers will go about shopping their usual way. So price changes in the short term often don't impact demand. However, in the long term, as people recognize the price changes, demand is more elastic as we seek out substitutes to meet our needs and wants. For example, an increase in the price of fuel might lead to consumers in the long term start to consider options like public transport, but in the short term that people will still buy the fuel to get to work because they have to. It feels like a necessity. And guys, they are your 4 factors: degree of necessity, availability of substitutes, proportion of income, and time. And I hope that as we recap, you now understand what we mean by price elasticity of demand and understand its significance, the percentage, how responsive demand is to change in prices. And we've considered 4 factors to talk about: degree of necessity, substitutes, proportion of income, and time. I hope that you've understood this concept of price elasticity of demand. There is a future video on price elasticity of supply, which will cover that. And I hope this has built your understanding of microeconomics.